Before dawn breaks over the hills of Silla, the palace is already awake. Oil lamps tremble in the corridors. Silk curtains stir in the cold air. Somewhere beyond the stone walls, roosters cry into the dark. And inside the royal court, men speak in low voices about signs they cannot explain. The stars have shifted. Not violently. Not enough to alarm the common people. But enough that the court astrologers, men trained to read heaven like a language, pause longer than usual before they speak. In Silla, the sky matters. The kingdom believes that heaven reflects the order of earth. When stars wander, rulers fall. When constellations dim, blood follows. And when unusual signs appear, they are rarely gentle. Imagine standing inside that court. Bronze incense burners breathe smoke into the rafters. Officials in dark robes kneel in careful rows. At the center, the king listens without moving his face. His rule is fragile. His kingdom, smaller than its rivals, survives not by strength, but by balance. To the west, Beach watches for weakness. To the north, Goguryeo sharpens its swords. Inside Silla itself, powerful families circle like wolves. This is not an age that welcomes uncertainty. And yet, uncertainty has already entered the palace quietly, without permission. It arrives not as an army, but as a child. The king has daughters. No sons. In Silla, this is dangerous. Power here does not simply pass from parent to child. It flows through bloodlines, ranks, and traditions older than memory. The court accepts queens as consorts, not rulers. A woman may influence. She may advise. But to rule openly, in her own name? That is another matter entirely. Whispers begin early. Who will succeed the king? Which noble house will rise when he falls? Will Silla fracture under its own customs before its enemies ever strike? Outside Korea, few people know how close this kingdom comes to collapse, not from invasion, but from hesitation. Yet the child grows. She is not loud. Not restless. She watches. While other children chase one another across palace courtyards, she lingers at the edges, listening. Her tutors notice that she asks fewer questions than expected, but remembers everything she hears. She notices patterns. The way ministers speak boldly in daylight, then soften their tone at night. The way flowers bloom earlier on one side of the palace hill than the other. The way birds abandon certain trees before storms arrive. In Silla, observation is power. And this girl is learning long before anyone suspects. There is a story quietly passed down, half dismissed as legend. One spring, the king receives a gift, peony seeds, sent from the Chinese court. The flowers bloom beautifully. Large. Perfect. But something is missing. They have no scent. The child notices this before the adults do. She studies the painting that accompanied the seeds. She studies the flowers. Then she speaks, softly. These flowers will have no fragrance, she says. The court laughs, politely. When the blossoms open and release nothing into the air, the laughter stops. From that moment on, some begin to look at her differently. Not with devotion. With unease. Because intelligence in a girl can be admired. Intelligence in a future ruler is something else. As the king's health weakens, the pressure tightens. The court divides into quiet camps. Some argue tradition must be protected at all costs. Others fear that refusing change will destroy the kingdom altogether. Enemies beyond the borders grow bolder. Raids increase. Alliances strain. Messengers arrive breathless, carrying news that never quite sounds hopeful. Silla stands on a narrow bridge between eras, one step behind it, tradition, one step ahead, survival. And the child, now a young woman, understands something many warriors never do. Force alone will not save this kingdom. Silla cannot outfight its enemies. It cannot outnumber them. It cannot intimidate them into retreat. But it can see further. At night, she studies the sky not as a dreamer, but as a strategist. She learns how seasons shift. How eclipses unsettle people. How belief can move armies faster than steel. She learns that silence can be louder than commands. Still, resistance hardens. Powerful men scoff at the idea of a woman on the throne. Some speak openly. Others smile while sharpening their knives. The danger is not sudden rebellion, but patient erosion. History does not always destroy women like her with violence. Sometimes, it tries to erase them with doubt. As the king's time draws short, the question no one wants to ask becomes unavoidable. Can a woman rule Silla? Or will the kingdom tear itself apart trying to prevent it? The stars above the palace continue their slow, indifferent movement. But those who know how to read them sense what is coming. A reign unlike any before it. A ruler who will not lead with the sword, but with foresight. And a test that will decide whether wisdom has a place on the throne at all. The crown is not yet hers. But time is already bending toward her. There is a moment in every royal life when childhood ends, not with a ceremony, but with silence. Imagine a quiet hall inside the palace of Silla. No music. No celebration. Only the low murmur of officials speaking carefully, as if each word might crack the floor beneath them. A decision has been made. Not spoken aloud. Not written down. But understood. The king's daughter will never truly belong here. In Silla, blood alone is not enough. Power is arranged like a ladder, rigid and unforgiving. Rank determines destiny. Birth defines the limits of ambition. And while women may stand near the center of power, they are never meant to sit upon it. So the girl grows up inside the palace, yet always slightly apart from it. She is taught court etiquette, poetry, and ritual. She learns how to bow, when to speak, and most importantly, when not to. But there are lessons she is never invited to hear. Doors that close before she reaches them. Conversations that soften or stop when she enters the room. She notices all of it. Few outside Korea know this part of her story. Queen Seondeok was not raised to rule. She was raised to disappear gracefully. But she does not. Instead, she studies the spaces she is excluded from. She listens from behind screens. She memorizes the rhythm of debates without hearing every word. She learns which nobles arrive early to court and which arrive late because lateness is its own form of power. Her intelligence does not announce itself. It sharpens. The court scholars underestimate her, and that becomes her advantage. They speak freely around her, assuming she is only a girl with polite curiosity. She lets them believe it. While others train for command, she trains for understanding. The world beyond the palace walls is shifting. Alliances fray. Rivals test Silla's borders like fingers pressing into bruised skin. Inside the kingdom, noble families grow restless, each one waiting for the king's weakness to become their opportunity. And the king is growing weaker. When illness confines him indoors, the court grows louder. Men argue over succession as if she does not exist. Names are exchanged. Promises are implied. Future loyalties are sold quietly, long before the future arrives. She watches these men and realizes something unsettling. Most of them are loud because they are afraid. Afraid of rivals. Afraid of change. Afraid of a future they cannot control. She learns then that power does not always belong to the strongest voice. Often, it belongs to the one who understands the room. At night, she escapes to the palace gardens. Not for comfort, but for clarity. She watches shadows stretch across stone paths. She observes how moonlight reveals what daylight hides. She studies the stars not as distant wonders, but as a system, predictable, patient, honest. In Silla, astronomy is not science alone. It is language. The sky speaks to those who know how to listen. And she listens. There is another story, quieter than the peony tale. One evening, a frog cries in winter, something it should never do. Courtiers are unsettled. Some call it an omen of chaos. Others dismiss it as coincidence. She does not. She traces the sound back to its source. A warm spring beneath frozen ground. Heat where none should exist. Life where tradition says there should be none. She understands the message before anyone explains it. The world does not always follow the rules written for it. Neither, she realizes, must she. Still, resistance gathers shape. Nobles begin to whisper that her intelligence is unnatural. That her insight is dangerous. That a woman who sees too much threatens the balance of heaven and earth. These are not accusations meant to be proven. They are meant to spread. History often works this way, soft hands pushing sharp ideas into the dark. The king knows what is coming. He sees the future narrowing. He sees that tradition, once a shield, has become a cage. And he sees his daughter more clearly than anyone else. Not as a ruler yet, but as a possibility. A dangerous one. As his strength fades, the court prepares for conflict without calling it by name. Alliances tighten. Smiles grow thinner. Loyalty becomes something performed rather than felt. And the girl, no longer a child, stands in the center of it all, still officially without a place. But something has changed. She no longer waits to be chosen. She begins to choose where she stands. In the next turning of the court, silence will matter more than swords. Observation more than armies. And the girl born without a place will soon face a question that cannot be avoided. Not whether she can rule, but whether Silla can survive without her. On certain nights, the palace sleeps, but she does not. Imagine standing on a stone terrace before dawn. The air is cold enough to sting the lungs. The court is silent. Even the guards speak only in glances. Above you, the sky stretches wide and unguarded, scattered with stars that have watched this land longer than any king. She stands there alone. Not in ceremony. Not in defiance. But in study. In Silla, the heavens are not distant. They are intimate. Every shift above is believed to echo below. A wandering star can weaken a throne. An eclipse can unmake a ruler. Most kings fear the sky. She reads it. The court astrologers are respected men, wrapped in tradition and ritual. They speak in formal phrases, careful not to alarm. But she listens past their words, watching their hands, their pauses, the moments when certainty falters. She understands something they rarely admit. The stars do not command. They reveal. And revelation, in the wrong hands, becomes fear. She begins to use this knowledge, not loudly, not openly, but with precision. When nobles argue over threats that may never come, she remains silent. When omens trouble the court, she asks quiet questions. Not, "What does this mean?" but, "Why does it unsettle you?" Few notice at first. Those who do, underestimate her intentions. Inside the palace, power is shifting. The king's presence fades further into shadow. Ministers test one another. Rival families tighten their circles. Each man believes he understands the game being played. They do not see her adjusting the board. There is a night when the moon disappears early, swallowed by cloud. Whispers ripple through the court the next morning. Some fear betrayal. Others fear invasion. A few fear that heaven itself is withdrawing favor. She speaks only once. The clouds pass, she says calmly. The moon does not. The room stills. It is not the words, but the certainty behind them, that unsettles the men listening. They begin to realize something dangerous. She is not reacting to events. She is anticipating them. Her understanding of astronomy becomes a form of quiet authority. When she predicts the return of a comet, and it appears exactly as she said, her reputation grows, not among the people, but among those who fear being unprepared. Still, resistance does not soften. Powerful men argue that knowledge is not rule. That insight does not command armies. That Silla needs strength, not symbols. They mistake her restraint for weakness. What they fail to see is how symbols move people faster than force ever could. When drought threatens the countryside, panic rises. She advises restraint, not prayer alone, but timing. When rain finally falls, just as she predicted it would, the people remember. Not loudly, but deeply. Few outside Korea understand how fragile belief was in this kingdom, how easily shaken, how fiercely protected. She does not exploit it. She steadies it. And that makes her dangerous. Some nobles accuse her of manipulating heaven itself. Others claim her predictions are coincidence dressed as wisdom. Quiet campaigns begin to discredit her. Rumors spread that her intelligence disrupts the natural order. A woman, they insist, should not read the sky. She hears the whispers and does nothing. Silence, she has learned, is not absence. It is pressure. As tensions rise, border threats grow sharper. Messengers arrive with news of enemy movement. Panic follows close behind. The court debates responses, voices rising, tempers fraying. She waits. Then she speaks. Not of soldiers. Not of weapons. But of timing. She points out that the enemy advances when certain stars rise, believing them favorable. She advises patience. Delay. Let belief weaken before blades ever meet. It works. The threat retreats without battle. Some in the court are relieved. Others are disturbed. Because if she can predict enemies, what else can she see coming? The question, no longer whispered, is now unavoidable. She is shaping outcomes without holding command. And that is more unsettling than any sword. The king watches all of this from behind failing strength. He sees how the court responds to her, not with loyalty yet, but with attention. And attention, in a court like Silla's, is the first step toward power. Still, the final barrier remains. Tradition. The sky may bend. Belief may shift. But law stands firm. Or so they think. As she gazes upward one final night, clouds drifting like slow thoughts across the stars, she understands something with chilling clarity. Seeing the future is not enough. Soon, she will have to step into it. And when that moment comes, the kingdom will be forced to decide whether wisdom can wear a crown or whether it must be silenced before it does. The crown does not arrive with applause. It arrives with tension. Imagine standing inside the royal court on the day the throne changes hands. The air is heavy. Not with celebration, but with calculation. Every noble face is composed, every bow perfectly measured. No one speaks more than necessary. Because today, something unthinkable has happened. A woman has ascended the throne of Silla. She does not rise dramatically. There is no roar of approval, no sudden surge of loyalty. She steps forward quietly, her posture steady, her expression unreadable. Silk folds around her like restraint, not ornament. This is Queen Seondeok. And from the moment she takes her seat, the kingdom begins to test her. Some challenges arrive openly. Border threats. Demands for tribute. Envoys who look past her toward the men behind her, as if waiting for the real authority to speak. Other challenges are more dangerous. Silence. Delay. Obedience performed without sincerity. Imagine ruling a court where every agreement must be watched twice, once for what is said, and once for what is meant. She understands this world immediately. She does not attempt to dominate it. She studies it. Her first acts are not displays of strength, but of awareness. She listens longer than expected. She allows ministers to reveal themselves through impatience. She lets rivals speak freely, because men who feel safe often say too much. They mistake her calm for indecision. They are wrong. Behind the scenes, she begins to reshape the kingdom, not by force, but by alignment. She supports learning. Encourages scholarship. Elevates those who understand systems rather than bloodlines. Astronomy, long respected, becomes central not as mysticism, but as order. When the heavens are stable, she ensures the people feel stability below. One of her most enduring symbols rises quietly during her reign. A tower. Not a fortress. Not a monument to conquest. But a place to observe the sky. Queen Seondeok stands simple and deliberate, built of stone, aligned with precision. It sends a message without a single word spoken. This kingdom will watch before it strikes. Understand before it reacts. Some nobles scoff. They call it indulgent. Useless against enemies. But the people see something else. They see a ruler who looks beyond the present moment. Who plans for seasons not yet arrived. And that, in uncertain times, feels like safety. Still, opposition sharpens. A woman ruling alone unsettles the old order. Powerful men fear not just her gender, but her method. She does not rely on them. She does not beg for loyalty. She makes loyalty unnecessary by making rebellion ineffective. This is a quieter kind of authority. And it breeds resentment. Plots form in private chambers. Letters travel at night. Accusations surface, always indirect, always careful. She is accused of weakness. Of superstition. Of inviting disaster by stepping beyond her proper place. She responds to none of it. Instead, she waits. When enemies test Silla's borders, she anticipates their moves. When famine threatens, she acts before desperation spreads. When omens appear, she interprets them publicly, calming fear rather than feeding it. Each decision strengthens the kingdom. Each success isolates her further. Because the more she proves herself capable, the fewer excuses her rivals have. And desperation makes people reckless. There is a moment, quiet, easily missed, when the tone of the court shifts. Ministers who once questioned her begin to rely on her foresight. Envoys adjust their language. Even her enemies start measuring their actions more carefully. Not because they admire her, but because they cannot predict her. Few rulers are truly dangerous. She is dangerous because she sees too much and says too little. Yet history is unkind to women like her. She does not wage grand wars. She does not carve her name into conquered lands. Her victories leave no bloodstains dramatic enough to remember easily. Instead, she preserves. She stabilizes. She prevents disaster before it becomes legend. And prevention rarely earns glory. As her reign continues, pressure tightens. Internal threats grow bolder. The quiet balance she maintains begins to strain. The cost of ruling without spectacle becomes isolation. And somewhere in the shadows, resentment sharpens into something more violent. The queen remains calm. But the sky she watches so closely is beginning to change. And this time, even foresight may not be enough to keep the coming storm from breaking. The message arrives at night. Not written. Not announced. But felt. Imagine standing inside the palace as a low wind moves through open corridors. Lantern flames tremble. Somewhere beyond the walls, a bell sounds once and stops. The court astrologers have seen something unusual in the sky, and by morning, the rumor will already be ahead of the truth. An omen has appeared. In Silla, prophecy is not superstition. It is power. What people believe will happen often matters more than what actually does. Queen Seondeok understands this better than anyone. She does not rush to the astrologers. She does not summon the court. She waits until the fear has just enough time to grow, but not enough to spread uncontrollably. Then she acts. Her rule is built on symbols carefully placed, like stones in a river. Each one shifts the current without ever stopping the flow. Imagine sitting among the ministers as she listens to reports of unrest. A strange sign in the heavens, they say. A warning. Some interpret it as heaven's displeasure with her reign. Others hint, never directly, that perhaps the kingdom has chosen the wrong ruler. She lets them speak. Then she asks a single question. Who benefits from fear? The room stills. Because everyone knows the answer. Prophecy, she understands, can be shaped not by lies, but by interpretation. She does not deny the omen. Denial would weaken her. Instead, she reframes it. The sign, she explains calmly, does not warn of collapse, but of change. Not an end, but a turning. Heaven does not threaten Silla. It prepares it. Her voice never rises. Her certainty does the work. The court leaves unsettled but steadied. This is her strategy. Never confront belief directly. Redirect it. She uses architecture the same way. Queen Seondeok, the observatory, stands quietly against the sky. To outsiders, it is simply stone. To the people, it is reassurance made visible. A queen who watches the heavens is a queen who will not be surprised by them. Enemies notice. Rival kingdoms send envoys who study her court closely. They expect spectacle. Threats. Displays of strength. Instead, they find patience and preparation. They underestimate her. She encourages rituals that emphasize harmony over dominance. Ceremonies that remind the people of order rather than fear. When the harvest is uncertain, she appears publicly not to promise miracles, but to acknowledge risk. This honesty builds trust more durable than force. But symbols cut both ways. Whispers spread that her reliance on signs makes her dangerous. That she rules not through law, but through omen. That the people listen to the sky more than to their elders. These whispers come from powerful men who feel their influence slipping. And they begin to test her. A rebellion does not begin with armies. It begins with doubt. Questions planted carefully. Loyalties quietly measured. She senses it before it fully forms. Not because she spies, though she listens well, but because patterns repeat. Ambition leaves tracks. Fear does not hide as well as it believes. She responds not with punishment, but with positioning. Key rivals are moved closer to the center of power where they can be watched. Others are given responsibilities that occupy their ambition. None are openly accused. Accusation would force their hand. Silence keeps them uncertain. There is a story told later, almost as a parable. When an enemy army plans an attack timed to an eclipse, believing darkness will bring victory, she orders no visible response. No troop movements. No alarms. The eclipse comes. Nothing happens. The attack is delayed. Confidence erodes. By the time action is taken, the moment has passed. She defeats an enemy without fighting by letting belief exhaust itself. This is not weakness. It is mastery. Yet the cost of ruling this way is isolation. Symbols protect the kingdom, but they separate the ruler from those who demand spectacle. Victories without blood are easily forgotten. Strategies without drama rarely become legend. And she is a woman. History will remember her carefully or not at all. Within the court, resentment hardens into resolve. Some now believe the only way to restore balance is to remove her. Not publicly. Not yet. But soon. She senses the shift. The sky she watches so closely begins to show signs she cannot ignore. Not danger alone, but inevitability. There are moments when even foresight cannot prevent what is coming. One evening, she stands again beneath the stars. The same terrace. The same cold air. But the silence feels heavier now. She has guided Silla through fear, belief, and uncertainty. But the greatest test of her rule is still ahead. And this time, symbols may not be enough to hold the storm at bay. The battlefield is quiet. Not because the war is over, but because it never came. Imagine standing at the edge of Silla's northern hills, where soldiers once waited for a clash that history expected, and nothing happened. No charge. No steel. No victory songs. Only men lowering their weapons as the moment slips away. This, too, is conquest. Queen Seondeok understood something most rulers never learn: survival does not always belong to the strongest army. Often, it belongs to the ruler who knows when battle is unnecessary. Her reign unfolds not in thunder, but in restraint. Neighboring kingdoms watch Silla closely. They expect fracture. They expect rebellion. They expect a woman on the throne to rely on spectacle or force to prove herself. Instead, they find patience. When threats arrive, they arrive wrapped in ritual envoys delivering warnings disguised as courtesy. When armies gather, they gather slowly, probing, testing. She responds by doing very little. And in doing so, she forces her enemies to reveal themselves. Imagine sitting inside the court as news arrives of troop movements across the border. Voices rise. Advisors urge immediate action. Some demand displays of strength to reassure the people. She listens. Then she asks what the enemy believes will happen next. Because belief, she knows, shapes behavior more reliably than command. She has studied the rhythms of her rivals, the seasons they prefer to march, the omens they fear, the moments when confidence turns brittle. When an enemy general delays because the stars are unfavorable, she delays too. Time becomes her ally. Armies consume resources simply by existing. Fear drains morale. The longer nothing happens, the heavier doubt grows. In one tense standoff, weeks pass without engagement. Supplies thin. Confidence fades. The enemy withdraws, not defeated, but exhausted. Silla stands untouched. The people do not cheer. There is no parade. Most never know how close they came to war. That is her victory. Inside the kingdom, she strengthens foundations rather than fortifications. Roads are improved. Learning is supported. Religious institutions are stabilized not to dominate belief, but to anchor it. She understands that a kingdom held together by fear will collapse the moment fear finds a new master. But unity built quietly can outlast armies. Still, opposition remains. Powerful families resent a ruler who does not need them to wage war. Generals bristle at victories that leave no glory to claim. Chroniclers hesitate because how do you record triumphs that leave no scars? History prefers noise. Her reign offers something else. There is a moment, late in her rule, when illness slows her steps. She spends more time seated, more time listening. The court grows restless again, sensing vulnerability. And yet, the borders remain calm. Enemies who once tested Silla now hesitate. Not because they fear retaliation, but because they no longer understand the mind guiding the kingdom. Unpredictability has become protection. She has transformed foresight into defense. Imagine standing beside her as she looks across the court one final time, not with pride, but with assessment. She has not expanded the kingdom's territory. She has not built monuments to conquest. What she has built is endurance. But endurance is easy to erase. After her passing, voices will argue over what mattered. Some will praise her. Others will minimize her achievements, calling them accidents of timing, or crediting men who stood near her throne. The absence of great wars will be framed as absence of greatness. And slowly, her name will fade from the loudest histories. Yet the kingdom remains. Silla does not fall when it should have. It survives pressures that break stronger states. It outlasts rivals who relied on force alone. Her wisdom lingers in systems rather than stories. In the choices that prevented bloodshed. In the patience that preserved strength. In the quiet belief that seeing ahead matters more than striking first. Few rulers leave behind empires. Fewer still leave behind stability. As her life draws toward its end, the stars above Silla continue their measured paths. She watches them one last time, not searching for omens, but confirming what she already knows. Armies pass. Power shifts. But wisdom, once planted deeply enough, can outlive them all. And as the kingdom prepares for a future without her, one question remains, one history has yet to answer honestly. Will Silla remember the woman who saved it? Or only the silence she left behind? History does not forget loudly. It forgets quietly. Imagine a court years after her death. The throne is occupied by another ruler. The rituals continue. The banners still rise with the morning sun. But her name is spoken less often now, only when necessary, only in careful tones. Time has begun its work. Queen Seondeok leaves no conquering armies behind her. No dramatic collapse marks the end of her reign. The kingdom continues, and in that continuation, memory softens. People remember wars. They remember disasters. They remember men who seized power with fire and blood. They rarely remember the ruler who prevented catastrophe before it arrived. In the chronicles, her reign becomes compressed, reduced, explained away. Some writers attribute stability to luck. Others credit the men who advised her, as if wisdom must have arrived from elsewhere. A woman, they imply, could not have shaped history so deliberately. Imagine standing inside a scholar's chamber generations later. Scrolls lie open on the floor. Ink dries slowly. A scribe hesitates before writing her name, then moves on, focusing instead on battles, alliances, and succession. This is how erasure begins. Not with denial, but with omission. Her greatest achievements resist storytelling. How do you record a war that never happened? How do you praise a ruler for disasters that failed to arrive? Silence becomes her legacy and her undoing. Yet traces remain. A stone tower still watches the sky. Calendars align with care. The kingdom's rhythms carry a logic she set in motion. These are not dramatic remnants. They are subtle ones. Few outside Korea ever learn her story. Even within it, her image shifts. She becomes symbolic rather than studied. A wise queen. A curious ruler. A name remembered without full understanding. Her foresight, once essential, now feels invisible. And perhaps that is the cost of her method. She ruled without spectacle in a world that remembers spectacle best. Still, imagine standing where she once stood, on the terrace beneath the stars. The same sky arches above, unchanged. The constellations she studied still return, patient and precise. The heavens remember. They remember a ruler who watched before acting. Who believed understanding was stronger than intimidation. Who trusted that balance, once achieved, could protect a fragile kingdom longer than any wall. Her enemies are long gone. Their ambitions dissolved into dust. Her kingdom endured. Yet history hesitates to grant her full credit. Because acknowledging her means admitting something uncomfortable, that wisdom can shape nations as deeply as violence, and that a woman, ruling quietly, can alter the course of time without leaving visible scars. There is a reason her story feels hidden. It challenges how power is usually told. She does not fit the pattern of heroes who conquer. She does not belong to the tradition of rulers who dominate through fear. Her authority was built on anticipation, trust, and restraint. These are not qualities history often celebrates. And so she lingers at the edges of memory. Almost forgotten. But not entirely. Because every time a scholar pauses over a line that does not explain itself, every time a reader wonders how Silla survived when it should have fallen, her presence returns. Unannounced. Uncredited. Undeniable. Queen Seondeok did not demand remembrance. She built a future that did not need her name to function. Yet as we look back now, standing at the distance history provides, a final question begins to form. If her wisdom shaped a kingdom? If her foresight outlasted armies? If her silence preserved a nation? Then perhaps the greatest failure was not hers. Perhaps it was history's inability to see her clearly at all. And as the stars continue their endless movement above the land she protected, one truth remains quietly in place. Some rulers change the world. Others ensure it survives long enough to be changed. Queen Seondeok was the latter. And history is still catching up.